the Lyceum in the Library series. It's something I kind of thought of last year and kind of built on where I can provide, hopefully for you, some new experiences, things that maybe you don't have access to always, and to kind of step outside of your box a little bit, maybe see some new things, and learn an appreciation of, at least even if it's something you don't really want to ever do again, at least you've seen it once in your lifetime. Friday we had Middle Eastern culture. We had geography and some language and some belly dancing. Monday we had Senator Unger, State Senator Unger, and State Treasurer John Perdue. Thanks to Mr. Barney for helping us get that. Today we have Mr. Engle, and I'll introduce him in just a second. Tomorrow morning we have an opera singer. My daughter-in-law is a professional soprano, so she's coming in from Baltimore. And so it goes. So if you have some ideas for me for next year, that would be great. We'll try to vary it and have different things. The art exhibit also complements the fish in the coral of the art department. We put together this conservation. I wrote a grant yesterday, of course, being Earth Day, for Wyland's beautiful marine artistry. Today, I'll get started. Mr. Engle here is a former teacher. Actually, he graduated from Hedgesville High School.
The old
one, which is now the middle school, and was born and raised here. First 21 years?
That's the first 21 years in downtown Hedgesville.
In downtown, well, we know how poppin' that place is. So he was a teacher himself. Now, don't hold it against him. He called it South Hagerstown. I think we played them. Did we play that South Hagerstown? The Bulldogs, I know when I was at Stoneview, but years ago when I graduated from Martinsburg, we used to play them. He's here to share with you some of his experiences. He's written a lovely book. I'm sure she got a lovely book. Thank you. And he's going to be doing a book signing. Many of your families, your grandparents, people you know, I don't know if you've ever heard of that 6 degrees of separation. It really does work. And this is his book, Stories from a Small Town, and his memoirs of growing up here. And I can identify with many of the things that he says. So please listen, enjoy. If you want to come back for a book signing, I always feed you, and so if you want a little cupcake, a little bit of punch, I'm going to have like refreshments. So enjoy, and thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you all for being here. I see smiling faces. I taught for 30 years, and I know it's weird to look back across and see students because you all seem to be just as happy as the ones that were in my class were. And that's sarcasm to the max. Let me ask you a couple questions. Has anyone actually read the book? A scruffette there or a weaselette in the front row. Let me ask you another question then. When you came to school this morning, when you arrived here this morning and got out in front of the school, what did you see? And that's a question I'm asking you, and I just want you to think about it for a minute. But think, when you either got out of the bus or you got out of the car or vehicle, what did you see when you arrived here today? And think about that. And my wife here with my public relations firm, when we arrived today, let me tell you what I saw today when I pulled in here. The first thing I saw was a blacksmith shop. And it was sitting off to the left over there. The boards were rough cut, brown, never had a paintbrush on them in their entire life. And directly across the road from that is a big white barn. And the barn has 2 doors on it. The doors opened up onto Ridge Road. And right out in front here when we came in, there was a man on a tractor. And his name was Norm Dillon. And that name does that name mean anything to anybody? Have you ever heard of Norm Dillon? You can raise your hand. Nobody's going to give you a quiz. Nobody's heard. You've heard of Norm Dillon. How have you heard of Norm Dillon?
Doesn't he like the farm museum?
Yeah, there's a farm museum across there with his name on it. Well, Norm was out here on a tractor, pulling a wagon, and there are two kids walking behind the wagon. One's pitching hay onto the wagon, and the other is stacking it on top of the wagon. When they get it loaded, they drive across the road, and they put it into that white barn up there. And it's about 100 degrees inside the barn, and it's dusty, and the air's, there's no clear air. You see particles floating around all over the place. And when they got that done, they took the empty wagon, went down the field, picked up rocks, and threw the rocks onto the wagon. And when they got that loaded, they stopped down at his house, picked up a couple axes, and went out and chopped firewood for a couple hours. They hauled the firewood down to the orchard, to a little building that was down there that was filled with people who had come here to pick apples. And most of them were from Jamaica. And then at the end of the day, one of the guys was standing there, and Mr. Dillon was paying him money. He was counting out the money. And this kid had worked for 8 hours, baling hay, stacking hay in the barn, picking rocks and chopping firewood, and he counted out the gentleman, or counted out the kid, his entire day's wages in cash. It was $4.80. He was paid 60 cents an hour to work for Mr. Dillon. And I know exactly how much he got because I was one of the 2 kids that did it. Can you imagine working all day for $4.80? I mean, minimum wage today alone is, what, $7.25 or something like that. But actually, I mean, you figured it out. I didn't see any of those things in real life. But in my head, they're all here. Where you're sitting right now is a hayfield. And the beautiful thing about this is that all of these are memories. They don't cost you a thing. You keep them, you store them inside your body, and if you're lucky enough, you can retrieve them every now and then. And that's what this whole thing has been about for me. It's been bringing these memories back into surface. Well, let me ask you another question. Does anyone live in Hedgesville? Anybody live in the town of Hedgesville? No one at all? Nobody. When I was growing up in Hedgesville, it actually was a town. We had a general store. We had a little restaurant, which is now the Catholic Church. And they served sandwiches and ice cream and so forth. At one time, there had been a pool hall. At one time, there had been a barber shop. At one time, a dentist's office. At one time, a doctor's office. And at one time, an undertaker. Everything you needed for a town. But all of them are gone now. There isn't a thing left in Hedgesville that goes back to that period of time, except for what people remember. There were maybe 12 to 15 kids my age, and we had the luxury of running around the town. I mean, we could always get a group together to go play a ball game or to play a board game or something like that, and we didn't have to go out and get in a car and drive someplace to go to the mall to meet people. We sat on the corner down there and waited for enough people to show up in order to do something. But Hedgesville had everything that we needed. You travel. You people have the luxury of traveling everywhere. You think nothing of going to Hagerstown. You think nothing of going to Winchester. You think nothing of going to D.C. If you want to go to a sporting event, you want to go see an Orioles game or a Redskins game, you can get the tickets and get in the car and go. As a kid growing up in Hedgesville, number one, we had no money, and number two, we had no car to go to those places. So we were limited to about the distance that your feet or your bicycle would take you. But that was a world because we had ponds, we had streams to fish in, we had Back Creek, which I call Back Creek, and we would go swimming in the creek down there. We had fields that we could hunt, we had woods that we could hunt in, and there were ball fields all over the place. Everybody's yard was a baseball field or a softball field. We had the elementary school. I assume you all have gone to the elementary school in Hedgesville, because that's the feeder. How many people went to Hedgesville Elementary School? A few of you. How about Hedgesville Middle School? Most of you. Yeah. That was my high school, and it was grades 7 through 12. We had about 300 people in the entire school, and my graduating class had 33. I can't imagine what your graduating class will be here this year, but it'll probably be several hundred. Yeah. So things are different, but the thing that doesn't change is your memory. For me, growing up in Hedgesville was the best place to grow up, and it was the best time to have that childhood in, because that's the only one that I had. You have one. You have one childhood. You have one time that you are a part of right now. And what I encourage you to do is don't rush through it. I know that at your age, it's good to look forward to things, and you have to plan to do things in the future, but don't ignore where you are right now, and don't forget about what you're doing right now. It might not seem important to you at this moment, but it is certainly going to in a short period of time. So let me give you a real quick Reader's Digest version of how this book came around. I was a biology teacher and a chemistry teacher, not an English teacher. I told somebody, they said, well, when did you start writing? I said, I've been writing the whole time I was teaching. I was writing detention slips and writing referrals and hall passes and bathroom passes and things. That's about as much as I ever wrote. So if you'd asked me 10 years ago, are you going to write a book? The answer would have been no. It was something that never entered my mind at all. But everybody has, you have these moments. You all have them, and you'll probably have them today. You're going to be walking someplace, and you're going to hear something, or you're going to see something, or something's going to trigger a memory. And something's going to remind you of a period of time that happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and you're going to think about it for just a minute, and then you're going to forget it. Do you ever have a dream that you wake up in the morning, and that dream is so real that you can remember all the details about it? It could be a dream where you won the lottery and you had $1 million, and you wake up and you're sad and disappointed. Or it could be a dream where you were mad at somebody, and you wake up and you see them in school and said, I'm so mad at you. And they can't figure out why, and you say, well, you did something in my dream, which makes no sense at all. But anyway, by lunchtime, how much of that dream do you remember? So my childhood was something that was on the back burner. I was working, going to school, raising a family, spent time in the military, and basically trying to scratch out a living like everyone does. So these things that happen in your childhood don't really seem important. But then all of a sudden, one memory popped into my head. And just like everybody else, I thought, that's neat, and I'll let it go. Another one came, and another one came. And I got very, very lucky, because I couldn't count the memories that popped back into my head on one hand, 2 hands, on 10 hands. They just kept coming. So I got out legal pad, and if I would, something that's like Miss Sharp's chickens. I remember I had a dog that used to go to this lady's house and kill her chickens and eat them all the time. Wouldn't eat them, he would play with them until they were dead. And then he would come back home with feathers sticking out of his mouth. And she wouldn't let me, I had chickens, she wouldn't take my chickens though. She made me pay her for the chickens that my dog had eaten. And she got 50 cents a chicken. And back then 50 cents a chicken was a lot of money. She could have asked me for $50. I had just about as much of either. So these memories came to me, and I scratched them down on a legal pad, just 2 or 3 words. And this went on for probably a couple years. Paid no attention to it, and then I thought this would be neat if I took these ideas and turned them into stories and gave them to my kids. Give them to my kids and my grandchildren. So, my children and my grandchildren, I have to talk. So, on a cold, wintry, snowy, windy, sub-freezing day, when I didn't want to go outside and do anything, I just opened up a piece of paper there and started writing down, and I wrote a story for the words that I had down. And I was amazed not only that I could do it, how quickly it came, and how easy it was to do it. So I took another one, and I wrote that one down. And every time I had this list of stories, when I would finish one, I'd check it off. But I had another pad of paper over here, and by writing these stories, new ones were coming into my head, so I would write new ones down. So this went on for several years. I mean, there was no rush to get anything done, because I was going to type this all into the computer, hit print, print out 10 or 11 copies, staple them together, and give them to my family. And that was going to be my gift to them. Because there will be a time when I won't be able to tell them these stories. I probably won't be able to remember them, let alone tell them. And they'll just sit there and throw Granddad a cheese cracker or something. And, tell him to watch whatever's on TV. So I did this. It went on for years. And again, no plan other than that. And then it's Christmas Eve, what, 4 years ago? 4 years ago. We have a house full of people, and my daughter walks in, and she says, I've got your Christmas gift. So she brings me this little tiny wrapped up thing, and she says, open it now. And no, open it now. So I opened it up, and it was this. And she says, I've got your book for you. So I looked at it, and I was amazed. My daughter is a graphic designer. So she had printed this out. She hand-sewn, hand-stitched, whatever you call it. So this was a book. So she said, read something to the people. So I thought, nobody in this room wants to hear a story that I've written. But I read one. And it just happened to be, that opened it up to a story about lard. You all know what lard is, right? It's something that you stay away from today. It looks nice, it's white, and it comes in a nice container, but it makes your cholesterol readings go through the ceiling. For us, lard was one of the food groups. I mean, we ate lard in everything, so it was lard. So I read it, and the amazing thing was that the people in the room were listening, and they actually enjoyed the story. So after it was over, I went to my daughter. Everybody's gone, and we're cleaning up, and I said, thank you. And why did you choose those stories? And she gave me this look, and I said, well, you put 13 stories in here. Out of all the stories that I've written, why did you pick these 13? And she didn't realize she had pulled one file from the computer, and there were probably 10 to 20 times that many stories in the computer. So over the next couple months, I did nothing with the book. She decides to look into it, and she shows up one day at the house, and she said, Dad, you got a book here. I said, yes, I'm going to print it out and give it to you all. No, it's a book. She says, it's a book that other people might like to read. That had never dawned on me. I mean, people start off to do something, and they work towards that goal. When I started to do this, there wasn't this goal or this light at the end of the tunnel that I was headed for. It was just something I was doing for me. It was a selfish thing that I was really doing to write these things down, because I probably got as much pleasure out of doing it as anyone who's ever read it will get out of reading the stories. But she said, we need to do this. So my wife had entered a lot of the things into the computer. I had put a lot of them in there. But I have a weird way of writing. I mean, you've seen doctors writing, and it looks like this. Okay, well, I can do that really good. I don't put a dot over an I. I don't cross T's. And I never put ing at the end of a word, even though I know it's there. So putting this stuff into the computer, there were mistakes. So between my wife and myself, we played around with this thing, and we were just as happy. We go, we're done. We've got us a book right here. Here it is. Give it to my daughter. And she says, now we got to get an editor. And I had never considered that. So we had a person in D.C. edit the book. And they sent us back with suggestions that they had made and things of that nature. Some of them we liked, some of them we didn't like. Basically, we didn't like 99% of them. So we got another person to edit the book. The first person put in a lot of commas. I mean, when you read the book, there were commas everywhere. The second editor took the commas out. So between my wife, my daughter, my son, myself, we figured we can edit this book. So we started. And this was where the process really got non-fun. I mean, this is work. Writing stuff down about your past and smiling while you do it is fun. Reading it and putting it in a form where you are going to read it, that's different. So we did it, and we finished it. We thought, oh, we've got a book here. We looked at it, we read it over again, well, there's some mistakes, so we did it again. And we did it again, and 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 again. 14 times. We have 14 versions of this book stacked up at the house in plastic tubs. And we finally got to where we said, we're done with it. This is the book. Now comes the problem of finding a printer. So we put it out for bids. Got a printer, you have to choose the paper color, you have to choose the paper weight, you have to choose the size of the book, you have to choose the color of the ink. Things that I had never considered in my life. To me, a book is a book. Here, the library's got books, magic, they show up. They're books. There's a lot of work that goes into those books, and I'm sure a lot of authors have people underneath them that do all the grunt work. Well, we did all the grunt work and all the work in general. So when we finally got to that point, we sent it to the printer, and they send us what's called a dummy book. And the dummy book, I love that term because it's a white cover, and when you open it up, there's empty pages inside. There isn't one single word printed on it. I mean, any dummy can read it. It's just, there's nothing there. But what it does, it shows you the size of the book. It shows you what it's going to look like. So we agreed on that one, and then they began to print the book. So they print you what is called a proof. And the book, when they finished it, they sent us a book. And my daughter had done the artwork. She had done the cover. She had done the layout of the thing. And we get the book, so we read it again. And understand reading. How many times in your life have you ever read the same book again and again and again? Well, we've read this book dozens of times by now. So we read it, and we find things that we don't like. So we send it back to the printer. They print out a new book. That happened 4 times. So we actually got 4 versions of the book back to the printer, and we said, we're done, this is it, we like it. They invited us to the printing plant to see the first ones come off the press. Again, something I'd never seen. I thought they printed, here's one page, here's one page, here's one page, here's one page. They print out 16 pages of your book at one time, not necessarily page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through 16. They print out this big thing, it's called a signature. It's got 16 pages on it, and then they send it to a machine, which looks like, and it does this, and it folds automatically, increases, and then it cuts. And those 16 pages are there, and then they do that in groups of 16 all the way through. We spent almost 4 hours adjusting the color on the book itself to get it to where we thought it would be. Those poor guys over there, they were probably so glad to see us leave. But when we left there, we came home. About 2 weeks later, we get a phone call that says the delivery can be made today. Where do you want the books? So we agreed, bring them here. And they showed up with cases of this. And it took from the beginning of this process until this got to my house, probably 8 or 9 years. And I know it could be done a lot quicker than that because I have written the second one, and it took about a year and a half to write it, and it won't take nearly as long to do it. But that's the process to get to this, right here. So we then, my work is done. I've written the book. I know the stories by heart. I don't need to read them again. But then you need somebody to market you. In comes the public relations firm there of wife, and wife. And she works very cheaply, too, I'll tell you that. I'm going to give her a raise next year. I'll double the salary. And that, to you, see, that's your term for what it is. Back in the 50s, that was not the term for Hedgesville. It was Hedgesville. So anyway, you didn't select that title. But then we sent it to people that didn't even know where Hedgesville was to see if it made sense to them. And they had no idea of where Hedgesville was, what it looked like now, or what it looked like then. And they read it, and I don't want to sound like there's some great ego, but we never got a bad response back from anybody about it. And you want people to tell you the truth, but a lot of times they just tell you what they think you want to hear. But in talking, I realized that these people were sincere. They were serious in what they were telling us. And they were telling us that they really enjoyed the book. So We then go through the process of marketing this thing, and we have things printed up, and fortunately my wife knows everybody. So we're voting for an election, and she runs into a lady who works at the Martinsburg Journal for the newspaper and education, Pam Cook. And we're talking, and Pam, we're talking about we're going to have a book launch, we just don't know where to have it. Hedgesville has no big building to have a book launch in. The library's under construction. You can't have a book launch at a school and sell books. They don't allow that. And the idea of a book launch is to sell books, because these things don't pop out of the machine free. I mean, you have to pay to get them done and so forth. So Pam says, oh, why don't you do it in conjunction with the newspapers and education book sale that we're going to have at the Martinsburg Mall. It's August, it's 100 degrees outside, the mall's air conditioned. Nobody from Hedgesville is going to refuse that. So we go in there and do that. During those 2 days, we had several hundred people show up, buy books, stop and talk. People that I had seen a week before, people that I hadn't seen in over 50 years, found out that the book was coming out, and they showed up not only to talk, but to buy copies, but mostly to talk. And from then, the response has been tremendous. And again, don't take this as I'm sitting up here bragging about a book. I mean, you all can, everybody out here can write a book. Absolutely guarantee you can write a book. You just have to do it. Oh, good, okay. Yeah, okay. So anyway, we've had people that picked it up and they said, I'm going to read, there are little stories in it, and they're all true. They said, I'm going to read 1 or 2 or 3 stories, put it down, read some more later on. They picked it up, read it. Picked it up, read it, kept it up. I've had dozens of people tell me they stayed up all night the night they got the book, reading the book. I've never stayed up all night to read anybody's book except to study for a test. So that in itself was amazing. I've got emails, I've gotten text messages, I've gotten handwritten letters from people telling me that when they read it, it was like somebody was standing there telling them a story instead of them reading a book. It was like somebody was just talking to them, telling them about something that happened in the past, which basically that's what it was. I've had people call me and say, I'm on my 5th reading of the book, and I've turned down the pages that I really like, and I go read those stories when I want to read one in a hurry. That is an unbelievable thing to hear, particularly when my goal was to print out 11 copies and give them to my children and grandchildren. So that has been phenomenal. We've been in magazines, we've been in newspapers, we're in bookstores around the tri-state area. We've entered competitions now to see if it's on any kind of scale with anybody else in the United States. And but I can't be disappointed, because I never thought it would get to this point. Never thought I'd be standing here in front of a group of students in Hedgesville talking about a book about Hedgesville. So it's just been good. So story time.
Story or questions? Or?
Did anybody have a question? Nobody's going to ask a question if I said the word stories.
Well, we have someone who's read the book. Maybe she has a
Here, this is her grandfather is in the book by his nickname. Hedgesville had a nickname. Let me read the nickname. Let me find some.
And there's also one on, we're all very familiar with Mr. Poisel.
Yes,
He subs for us.
Oh.
He's like our principal in residence, isn't he? And Mr. Poisel isn't that the general store you're speaking of?
Yeah.
And so his family had the store in Hedgesville.
His
So
family,
it's kind of interesting.
they ran it. In fact, he was one of my sources. When I was writing stuff down, I thought, am I making this up, or is it really the way it happened? So I would go to Jimmy and I'd say, or Mr. Poisel, and I would say, do you remember the people that were killed in the graveyard? We had a family that got killed in the graveyard up here, believe it or not, driving their car. He had a heart attack in the graveyard. If you've ever driven through a graveyard, you know you drive very slowly. But when he had the heart attack, his foot went down on the gas pedal. And gravel was flying, and we were down to elementary school playing ball in the graveyard. It's right up there on the hill. And we heard the gravel flying, so we all went up there. And he had ran his car right into a tree. There aren't that many trees in the graveyard, but he found one of them.
He was dead instantly from a heart attack. It was a very fancy car, a 1955 Mercury, yellow and black. His wife had a seatbelt on. We had no idea what a seatbelt was. The seatbelt wasn't like the ones we have today that gives a little bit. It didn't give at all. It gave right through her. It just, they were both dead. Isn't that an uplifting story? But anyway, I went to Mr. Poison and I said, do you remember the people that were killed in the graveyard? He said, yeah. I said, Mr. and Mrs. Clayton, yeah. He said they were driving a 1955 Mercury. And it was black and yellow. Because that's what I was a little bit curious about. But anyway, her grandfather and I grew up side by side. I mean, his yard and my garden backed up each other. And we had nicknames. Her family had nicknames. They were the nickname kings and queens of Hedgesville. Some people had one nickname. Her grandfather has multiple nicknames. Okay? But here's some of them, and you all have nicknames. Some of them you probably can't say out loud in public, but anyway, these are all clean. These are all the G version nicknames. I'll go through them. There was Bear, they're in alphabetical order. Bear, Beef, that's one of yours. Bird Legs, Boo, Boodlers, Canhole, Deacon, Doc, Gooper, Flea, Fluff, Hams, Hoggy, Horse, Hound Dog, Miser, Nip, Peck, Pee-wee, Pig Nose, Pruny, Ribby, Scruff, Snooks, Socks, Suicide Tank, Fart, Tight, Weasel, and Weetsick. Most of them mean nothing. I mean, people get nicknames for some great act they did, you know, or you get nicknames for doing something dumb. But how would you like to have your nickname to be Pig Nose? You know, that guy, I can still picture him, and I don't know. I don't think he probably felt too nice being called Pig Nose. But I went to college with a guy, and his nickname was Frog, and he's a dentist here in Lawrenceburg. And when I walk up to him in the store, I still call him Frog, and most other people call him Dr. So-and-so. But to me, he's Frog. Why I call him Frog, I have no idea. But anyway. Okay.
What's the store? Just a little snippet of how it was your super Walmart.
Okay. We had a general store, and it was Poison's, and it still exists in Hedgesville today. And I don't know, it was Sunshine Shirts for a while there, and there was a hardware store, but it sits right at the intersection where you have a stoplight now. Inside that store, it had everything that we needed. You go to Walmart, you all go to Super Walmart, and you have everything you can get. We had Super Walmart in Hedgesville. When you walked in on the left-hand side, ice cream chest, pop coolers, chairs that you actually sat on and loafed, a bench that you could loaf on. The left side had fresh vegetables. Next to the fresh vegetables was the clothing selection. You could buy your shoes, you could buy your jeans, you could buy shirts. Not many varieties, but they were there. Then there was the canned food section. Then there was the frozen food section, such as it was. And then there was a section over here where the ladies could buy material, needles, thread, embroidery thread, things of that type. And in the very back of the store was a giant walk-in white meat cooler. When I say giant, it was probably about 8 feet by 8 feet, but it was giant for us because it had a window in it like that, and in there you could see meat hangings. You go to Walmart and you see, or you go to Martin's, you get your meat in a package. When we went to that store, if we went there to buy meat, we'd say, I'd like a pound of hamburger. Mr. Poisel would go in the back with a knife, cut off a chunk of meat, shove it in this grinding machine, and out would come a pound of hamburger. It wasn't prepackaged. There was no lunch meat. If you wanted a bologna sandwich, you went over and said, I'd like 3 pieces of bologna. If you want hot dogs, you didn't buy a pack of 8 hot dogs or a pack of 10 hot dogs. I'd like 4 hot dogs. And that's how it was sold. The Oreo cookies. You buy a pack of Oreo cookies today, you can get the little ones or you can get the big ones. We bought Oreo cookies one at a time. I'd like 6 Oreos. Unheard of today. A box of 22 rifle shells or shotgun shells. When we were ready to go hunt, we'd go in the back and say, I need 8 12-gauge slugs. And you buy 8, or I need a half dozen 22 long rifle shells, and that kind of thing. It was small, but it was everything we needed. To the side of it, chicken feed, hog feed, cattle feed, nails, bolts, screws, wire, posts, fencing. All of that was in the same store. It was like Walmart and Tractor Supply all stuck together in one store. And we didn't need to go to Martinsburg. We went to Martinsburg maybe once a week if we were lucky. Can you imagine that today? I mean, you guys, some of you come probably from Martinsburg here to school or close to Martinsburg. We would go there maybe once a week. Hagerstown, we went to Hagerstown at Christmas. Left before they could figure out where the bird was getting its education. But that's what it was like being a child in Hedgesville. It's different. I want to close here real quick, and then maybe you will have other questions. I've got something written down here. And I don't have it in my head because it just happened. But everybody's read something about Mark Twain, right? Mark Twain, when he got real old, he said a lot of things that were like, they're just interesting things that you keep in your head forever. But he said he was amazed that as he aged, that his memory got better. Well, most people, you think about your parents and your grandparents, as you get older, you tend to forget. Well, Mark Twain says as he got older and aged, his memory got better. In fact, it got so good that he could start remembering things that had never ever happened. Think about that. He's just making them up. And nobody cares. When you're old, you can get away with it. So, Saturday Night Live. Everybody watches Saturday Night Live? Who was the host 2 weeks ago? Time's up. Vince Vaughn. Okay? You know who Vince Vaughn is, right? Okay. He said some things which I never thought I'd be quoting Vince Vaughn. But this is what he said. There's 3 things he put down. He says, first of all, I said, put down your cell phone and become a part of the memory. Put down your cell phone and become a part of the memory. Second thing he said was, it's what you keep inside that's better than any picture that you can take. And he actually was doing this to himself when he did. This was amazing that this guy was saying these things, and I stopped it, paused it, grabbed the paper like I do and wrote it down. And the last thing he said was, treat life as if it was a live performance that you are a part of. And don't act like you're a spectator at a sporting event. And to me, those are 3 very, very valuable things. And the last thing I'll leave with you is that when we talked about titles of the book, I had a title that I wanted, and it got shot down. Every time I brought it up, it got shot down. So it's a part of this last thing, though. It says, everyone has at least one book in them, and it's called your life. You have one. And my suggestion to you is to start writing it now. Don't wait and get lucky like I did. I really got lucky. I mean, I was blessed to have this happen to me, that I remember this stuff. But you have it fresh in your mind now. Write it down. And you won't be called weird or geek or whatever the correct term is now for doing it. You don't even have to share it with anybody now, but write it down. There will come a time when it will mean something to you. Now, thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer. Good.
As a former English teacher, I was in the classroom a long time, and Caitlin and Ms. Hatfield will tell you, how many of you all write an essay and edit it 1 time or 2 times at the most? So I think that was pretty valuable. That I know that your teachers, your English teachers, all your teachers tell you go back and look over your work, but it is a process, and I think that's very interesting to hear that you really do need to edit, and it's not a fun thing to always do.
It's not fun because you're not reading it like you're writing. You're reading it to see if it's correct, so you read each word.
So,
Reading each word is not fun.
but just notice when he says, 14 times, my gosh, and we don't expect you to do it 14 times, but twice would be nice, huh? No. Any other people have any questions about, and certainly share this. I know that a lot of you are so young, but share this with your parents, your grandparents. I don't know if you've ever heard of the 6 degrees of separation. Is anybody familiar with that term? Okay, what does that mean? Oh, Miss Chrysler. What's 6 degrees of separation?
I think got started with, like, I think everyone is 6 degrees from Kevin Bacon. I believe where it got started.
Yeah.
Essentially, in 6, I feel like layers that we are related to someone in some fashion.
And that you would
Completely
touch,
random, but
in
we are
essence,
all
touch
connected.
base with them. And so I think if you mention this, you'll be surprised at who might in your family be really familiar with something. As this student, Haley, her grandfather is one of the, correct? One of the nicknamed persons that are in the book. Of course, Mr. Poisel, you all know. But I think that's kind of an interesting thing for you all to realize. And I think there was a movie Will Smith was in, both called 6 Degrees. So that kind of puts it a little more on your level of realizing what the student book. And it's a really pretty good book. I mean, movie. So I really like the one on TV, but I remember my memory is the first time we had a color.